Great. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining our second webinar of the Open Finance Lab. I am Nidhi Bhattacharya, Director of Product at Tarabut Gateway, and I shall be your host for the session today. So OFL is an initiative launched by the IFC along with Tarabut Gateway and 6 banks in the UAE to spearhead thinking around open banking and open finance use cases. Through the speaker series specifically, we bring experts from around the world to share their learnings, bring perspective on varied topics that we can then hopefully bring back into the region. So just before we start, as a note, we are recording the webinar and that shall be shared with all. All right. So we have with us today Philip Higlin. Philip is a former soccer player. He is also the founder and CEO of Gamey App and is leading the agenda on financial literacy for young adults around the world. Gamey App is an application. It enables children to learn smart money habits and has in fact educated about 1 million users since its launch in 2015 in the Nordics. So welcome, Philip. We are delighted to have you with us. How are you today?
Thank you, Nidhi. Happy to be here. I'm great. And welcome everyone to this webinar. So today I want to talk a little bit about the importance of financial education and financial literacy, and a little bit also about how banks can use this as an opportunity, a win-win solution to make sure that we educate the next generation, because I think that's necessary.
All right, let's get right to it then, right? So I'd say as a parent to 2 kids, the topic speaks to me, it resonates with me, right? And I think as an ecosystem of parents, caregivers, educational institutions, we are all playing an important role in ensuring that the education we provide to the next generation is well-rounded, right? We want it to be multifaceted. We want to make sure that it equips them with life skills that we hope they will then use to navigate the everyday successfully, right? So with that, maybe did you want to start us off with, the importance of money in general, the importance of financial literacy and its importance for the young generation, Philip?
Definitely. I think an important question to ask is money important for us as human beings, actually? So I wanted to start off a little bit to talk about Björn Natthiko. Björn is he was a monk for 17 years. So he actually left his job at a prominent company here in Sweden to go and live as a monk at monasteries around the world for 17 years. And why is his story interesting? I think that is because as a monk, you do not actually have any access to money. So you can't use money, you can't even own your own money, and everything, not only money, is given to you, food, things, etc. And what Björn found out, and why he also ended being a monk, was that he found out that he actually was happier without money. He found out that his life became richer when he had absence of things rather than presence of things. And I think we can learn a lot from that. And I think also that that's actually a lesson for us. And in the consumption society we're living in today, I think that we have lost a little bit about the understanding of needs and wants, where we think that a lot of wants actually are needs. So just to understand a little bit, like, how do we think about money? Is money important for us? There actually have been studies going back all the way to the 60s, where we've been asking college students that to come out of college, like, what do they think is considered to be essential or very important for them in life? What objective? And if we go back to the 1970s, 28% thought that being very well off financially was considered the most important thing for them in life. And now, 50 years later, 82% thinks that being rich is the most important thing in life. So you can ask, like, okay, what happened? So if we go back to the 1960s, of course, those were the happy hippie days, right? People think that developing a meaningful philosophy of life was the most important thing. But somewhere along the way, we have actually think that is to be rich. So being rich, is that making us happy? So we have, here's Kalle. So when I work with Gimme, we usually have children coming into our office. They're helping us out with UX research. We ask them about colors, features, flows in the app. What do they like? What do they don't like? And the other day I asked Kalle, what do you want to be when you grow old? And he said, I want to be a millionaire. Okay, so why do you want to be a millionaire? He said, I want to be rich. Okay, so what are you saving for? Yeah, to be a millionaire. The thing was, he didn't want money to spend it on anything. He just wanted to become rich. And some people do. And some of them, as an example, are actually athletes. And they become rich usually over a quite short period of time in their life or in their careers. So it could be for 5-10 years to have a much higher income than the regular person. But when they end their career, usually in the age of 30 to 35, they then have a higher chance of going into personal bankruptcy. So it might not be about the money. It might be about how rich you are. It might be about your relationship or your attitude towards money. And I just want to say, like, you might think now, okay, so this study was made on NFL players and they're stupid, right? Like they don't have education or those things. But the thing is that they made this study also on people who are well educated. And they could see no relation between being well educated and your financial literacy, meaning you don't become smarter. So actually, the proficiency where we see among the lowest financial literacy levels are medical doctors. So how do you become financially literate? The research is quite clear. You do become financially literate usually in the age between 7 and 12. That's where your attitude and your relationship with money is being formed. So what happens if we don't educate young people? The effects will come way later, usually when they're 18 or beyond. But I would say today, the financial education starts actually as early when the child is in the age 4 to 7. What they do is something called socialization, is that they look at someone else or talk to someone else about money. Maybe they start saving their first candy. It's not even have to be about money, but just the understanding of choosing between different things. Unfortunately, today, many societies are turning cashless. So as a child, you can get a really hard time to understand, like when your parent is swiping the card, is there even a transaction? Where does money come from? How do they end up at somewhere else? There's no real understanding of that. So in many cashless societies, as Sweden, for instance, when the child is 8 to 11, and they should start using their own money, they don't, because the parents usually pay for them with their card, or the child just borrow their parents' card and pay with it. So if we want to understand how well-educated children are in personal finance, we need to start like doing tests. The only test we have today on financial literacy is made by PISA. It's done globally, so worldwide, and it's being done on children aged 15. And what we know from that test is that financial literacy is declining. So people or children in general are becoming less financially literate. They know less about money management. And I would say there are different reasons for why children are missing out on money learnings. The first area I would talk about is schools. So financial literacy today is very much related to how much you know in language, your mathematics, and those are key elements to be able to use your own money, right? But we don't educate children in loans, in taxes, how to set up a budget. It's not part of any school's curriculum globally. So children can grow up, go through through school, and when they become adult, they have not gained any financial education in school. Secondly, I would say that parents do think themselves being very responsible for educating their children. It's quite usual. But the problem for parents today is that they are getting sometimes more excluded from their children in terms of the social platforms the children are on. So children can usually be on their own digital platforms. They don't want to share Facebook with their parents. They want to be on Snapchat or TikTok. So parents actually feel further away from their children. And they also think it's really hard to teach financial literacy. And a lot of parents themselves are actually financially literate. So now we come to third part, which is mobile banks. So today, most people use their money in mobile banks. That's how we interact with money, as we don't use cash anymore. But unfortunately, out of 30,000 banks globally, there are like 1 to 5 that do even have a child adapted youth offer. And many of the ones that do actually fail in building them. So Credit Suisse, for instance, has invested a lot of money into building a youth offer. Unfortunately, it's not user-centric. It's the same with the Swedish bank, Swedbank. For children, if you think about it, they're spending their time on Snapchat, TikTok, Fortnite, Roblox. Those are like cool games. For them, this app looks like it's built in the 90s. And it's probably because it's built in the 90s. And lastly, I just want to show Max, which is from Germany, but it's the same thing here. It doesn't follow the design and the I would say expectations next generation have on the digital platforms. So the effects from this, we will see when children turn 18. Yeah. That's when they are fully responsible for their own money. And that's when we can start measuring and find data on how financial literacy is impacting us as human beings. And here we know some things that we've seen in the latest research here throughout MENA region as well.
Right, and I think these are some really great points, Philip. And I think, like you said, when we look at research in the region around the same topic, right, looking at the numbers and the worldview that you've provided, the numbers from the region align to it, right? So research, some numbers that jump out to us is that 43% of the millennials, right, folks, children who haven't gotten this basic financial literacy are now millennials, and they say that they are not adept at managing day-to-day money activities, right? And in fact, if you move on, very, very important statistic next is that I think 50% of them feel that schools, education that they got has not provided them with skills to make those decisions that are on an everyday basis, right? And of course, if you take a step back, it's of course compounded by the fact that there's a pandemic that we've just, about to start to come out of. Millennials who are in their early careers have an issue with, managing disposable income. There is easy access in this region to consumer finance, which means a tendency to, to have huge debts, but no way to manage them, right? And I think all of this sort of goes back to the fact that who is then responsible for driving this change? Should this be financial institutions? A percentage of users seem to think so, right? It should be financial institutions along with the ecosystem that is driving this, for the younger generation. And I just want to bring back the point that you said, that the way we interact with money has changed or is changing as we speak, right? We're living in a completely digital or a mostly digital world, which means for the younger generation, if they don't have a tangible way to interact with money, if they're always seeing a phone being tapped to make a payment, then how do they sort of understand the intrinsic value of money? What does it mean to spend some money? And I think that sort of takes us to the next topic that I think we'd like some of your insights in, is to, when you're developing an experience then, which is catered to a younger generation, what are some of those key aspects or key things that you keep in mind to make sure that the experience is sticky, it's something that the younger generation relates to, will come back to, and then ultimately, reap benefits out of?
I think to touch upon it, the first thing that I see when looking at the next generation is that they actually come into a different landscape than we grew up with. So maybe when we grew up, we got like an allowance with cash, and we went to the kiosk or we went to the store and we bought something. It was, I would say, quite it was anyway easier for us. So the financial landscape is shifting quite dramatically, and we actually don't know how things will turn out in the coming 10, 15 years, right? But we know that it will probably become even more complex. But what we can see today over the last like 5, 10 years is that children have started doing microtransactions. And those are quite hard to track. It's hard for anyone to track them. They are being, through their social feeds, they are being marketed with things they have just looked at. It's like remarketing, and the marketing is becoming smarter and smarter. Here in Sweden, 50% of 10-year-olds are buying things in games. When we grew up, that wasn't even possible, but they're spending with one click online. And we know that shopping has become way more simple. You have 3 clicks to buy a product. Before you had to, I don't know, take the bus to the mall and, you know, buy the stuff there. But this whole financial ecosystem has become way more accessible. And actually, for the people who are not financially literate, has become way harder to navigate. So I would like to say that the big opportunity here for any player, like any bank, as for Gimme, is to educate when the children are using their money. That's the absolute biggest opportunity. Education while people are using their money. So that's why we created Gimme. I'm going to talk a little bit about Gimme and then show a little bit how we can build products that are catered for the next generation. So just a little bit about us. We want to make every interaction with the app a learning experience. So every time the child goes in and use features, we want them to learn from it. Since we started in 2015, we educated over 1 million children throughout the Nordics only. And they are doing lessons and tests in the Gimme app, which means that we actually test their financial literacy level. And we know the maturity, which differs a lot, not only on age, but demographically. We're best app all categories in App Store. And I think what's important is that the parents see that the children are becoming smarter with their money when they're using this. And as well, we can see that it's actually increased the security. But what happens here is that the parents and the children have access to the same platform, which means that the parents have an overview, they have a control, there's a transparency of how they're using their money. And that also creates a lot of conversations about money, which in itself, it's very educating. So we built Gimme not only as an educational tool, but also as a mobile bank, which means that the children can use it to actually look at their updated account balance. They can view transactions, they can see their spending patterns, and they can see their upcoming allowance, so they can make sure to plan, you know, I'm gonna get my next allowance on Saturday, and then I can plan and budget for it. What we can see with Gimme is that it's very engaging. So children log in more than 5 times every week to this app. And the ones who start using it, over 80% continue using it month over month, meaning they actually leave their regular banking app to use Gimme instead. I think in general, when looking at building educational, and especially in finance, educational platforms for children, you need to combine different areas. What we're doing at Gimme is that we're combining education with financial tools and gamification. When we talk about financial tools, it's stuff like, okay, you need to be able to make a transfer. You need to be able to see where you've been spending your money. It has to be your real bank account connected to it. When we talk about education, we talk about learning methodologies, which means that you continuously need to learn. We need to make it hands-on. It has to be practical for children. And when we talk about gamification, we're talking about nudging, because children today, in every platform they're using, they have gamification. They're used to it. So if you want to create something that's engaging for the next generation, you need to have gamification on top. So to show you a little bit of the features, these are just examples from the Gimme app to show you how we're thinking. So this is a child who just made a purchase at Starbucks. Now that child can click that purchase and choose, was it a great success or a deep regret? Is it something they liked or something they disliked? This time the child actually disliked it. What we can do with this is that the children can self-reflect on their spending, and we can help them save the data and show them which are the merchants that you like, how often do you make purchases that you regret, and it becomes a very educational way of the child to learn from it. I would say anyone can implement this on any platform for grown-ups as well, because we also need this. Secondly, I just want to approach interest rate a bit, because a lot of children think it's hard to understand what this means. But the thing is that then you need to implement it. So what we've done in the Gimme app is that parents can set up a parent paid interest rate. So if the child has 100 euros on their bank account and the parent implement a 2% interest rate, the child will earn another 2 euros on their allowance every month. And this makes them understand that if they save, the money will grow. So if you teach this theoretically in schools, it's not easy to understand, but when it happens in life, it becomes way more tangible for them. We've also created a savings feature for children. And what we saw was that children wanted to travel their way through to their savings goal, and even backwards if they are spending money. And we've done research on this one, and it's actually increased the children's savings behavior. If they use this, they actually save more, which I think is a super important lesson. In the Gimme app, we also made the money visually, like make it more tangible. So we made coins and bills adding up to the balance that they have in the app. So when they spend, the coins and bills will disappear, and when they earn their own money, it will grow. We also created a way for children, because a lot of children reach out to us through our chat, and they want to talk to us about money, and they want to talk about like their spending, saving. They want to talk a lot about a lot of things. So what we saw was that sometimes they don't have the parents or even friends to talk around money to. So we built this chatbot so that children can interact with someone, talk to someone about money. I also want to touch upon this. So since we don't have personal finance as a curriculum in schools, there are a lot of things, a lot of theoretical learning that is missed out. So we built our own personal curriculum, a personal finance curriculum based on 9 different areas. And the children can go through different interactive modules and learn. And actually travel through to new planets and learn new things. And when doing so, the children are receiving XP. And that's because they want to upgrade their avatar in the app. So what I'm showing right now is a way to combine gamification with learning in finance, and also to make it interactive and fun for children.
Great. I think this actually seems like fun for me too, Philip, frankly.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, great. So we've seen till now, we've seen the importance of, I guess, financial literacy for kids, starting them young. And then we looked at, the importance of actually building an experience that caters to that specific audience in terms of aligning with what they would expect, right? With that said, I think that brings up the third part here in terms of what does that mean for a bank then? So you have an application that caters to a specific audience. It's tailored with content, with experiences that are relevant, and we understand that it's a need to educate the children. But if a bank was to get a youth proposition up and running, what does that mean for a bank, right? Are there options for a bank to get this up and running? And if yes, what does that look like? So let's talk a little bit, I guess, about that as well.
Yeah. First, I would say in the conversations I've been having with banks, I think there are 3 main areas that are important for the bank. The first one is actually about social impact. It means a lot for the bank to build a good brand and to show that you contribute as a bank with social impact. The other 2 parts, I would say, is about the users or the customers of the bank. The first one is about the children. If we look at the next generation, most of them base their choice of bank on the digital services the bank cater to the group. So they think that digital services are the most important when they choose bank. What we also know is that around 60% of the bank's whole user base is actually built on young customers coming in. So when a bank has their whole user base, around 60% came in as a youth. So it's really important for banks globally to cater to the youth segments, because most children actually stay with the same bank post years 30 as main banking customers. Secondly, I would say it's about the parents. We have seen banks who actually leave the bank and go to a competitor because they lack a good youth proposition. Parents want to teach their children personal finance. They want to have a good youth offer. They think the family and the children is maybe the most important thing for them. So I would say it's about these 3 things that's super important for the bank: social impact, new customers, children coming in, but also catering and retaining parents.
Okay.
So then usually also when I talk to banks, some say like, oh, we don't invest in youth propositions. But the thing is that most banks globally actually issue cards and bank accounts for children. But what is lacking is the competitive advantage, which is the family adapted app, the security and control, and the financial education, which is what the users want. And what we can see is that banks tend to do yearly investments on the rolling cost on bank account, support, issuing, marketing, maintaining the app, and actually going to schools and talking about money. So the substantial investments to have a competitive advantage might be small, and it might come with substantial return on investment. So I want to show you a little bit of how that can be done, because with the Gimme app, what we've done is that we have built it so it can be fully white labeled. It means that we can switch out any visuals, assets like fonts, logos, avatars, animations to cater to the bank's brand. And secondly, we have connected throughout Europe 400 banks to connect the bank accounts, and we're doing it through open banking.
Yeah. I think you bring up a great point around open banking, because I think just about being able to provide a real life experience to a child on how money flows into an account. I think that is very powerful, and just the autonomy of being of that's not monopoly money, right? It's an actual account, it's actual money, it's flowing into your account, you're tracking it. And then basis this app, you're possibly, reflecting on it, making a course correction if needed, and then, sort of doing this month after month, which then develops the habit. So yeah, absolutely. I think let's go ahead and see what you have in terms of the product itself and branding.
So when we talk about white labeling the app, we usually set up different branding alternatives together with the bank. Usually it's about if the bank wants to pursue a full market rollout. So it could be like Gimme being powered by UBS or another banking brand. But it could also be that it's fully white labeled. It means that Gimme has nothing to do with the branding at all. We co-brand fully the app. We switch out features, illustrations. So for the end customer, this looks like it comes from the bank. We're just acting as a third party in between with the interface here, really. And secondly, I would say, when we look at the integration, we're using open banking. So in Europe, we fall under the PSD2 directive, which means that there's no integration on the banking side. We integrate through open banking and use the open APIs to fetch account balance, transactions, and make payment initiations so that the parent can transfer the allowance or make a simple transfer. And this happens all through this interface of the Gimme app. And the bank just have to cater to the open APIs. And this is also what we've been looking to do with TG throughout the MENA region, which means that we want to cater to banks in the MENA region. Just to show you how this looks, because you might think like, okay, it's super hard to connect the bank account. I'll tell you, it's better and easier to connect the bank account through our platform than it usually is through the regular mobile banks that people are using. So just to show you, in this case, a parent wants to connect their son's bank account. They just have to prove the user terms and then choose what bank they are using, and then go through an authentication, which is the same authentication that they are used to do with that bank. And then they can choose what bank account they want to activate in the app. This usually takes less than a minute, and we have over 98% going through successfully this flow. When this is done, the account information is constantly being fetched. So the app is always up to date.
I think I guess it's sort of a testament to truly the power of open banking to make this experience as realistic as possible for a parent, but also so much for a child, where they are exposed to the idea of banking on their own at a very early age, right? And which is going to hold them in good stead as they grow up. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. I would also say that a lot of banks feel sometimes that there are so much implementation they need to do on their side to launch a youth offer. That is not the case anymore. With open banking, we can do the integrations and quite easily launch a youth proposition.
Absolutely. I think with that, Philip, I want to sort of round this up with you've touched upon the fact that you've actually implemented this with banks across Europe. So maybe it would also be beneficial for us to get a little bit of a sense of what is the feedback or the learnings that you're hearing from both the banks, but also from the customers, from both parents and children alike. So let's maybe talk a little bit about that, because that might be helpful in understanding how has this actually landed on the ground?
Yeah. So in April this year, we launched with ABN AMRO in the Dutch market, so in the Netherlands. And we chose to cater to all families because ABN AMRO wanted to do a social impact. So what we did was that we launched within 77 days. That was mainly due to co-branding. The integration was done in 7 days because it was already made. So we just had to toggle it on. What happened afterwards, I like to show you the detailed graphs, but I can't. But we reached over 20,000 downloads and became top 20 finance app in the Netherlands. These numbers have actually increased. So we're over 30,000 downloads right now, and we're top 10 finance app in the Netherlands. What we also see, and which I'm really proud about, is that we have made an impact, socially impact on the children. So we are tracking, for instance, the personal finance in-app lessons and tests taken by children. So from the bank's point of view, they launched a youth proposition, which catering to the full market, but it's for free for all the ABN AMRO customers, which is really a competitive advantage for them. In terms of what the users have been saying, we have done, I would say, both user testing, but also quantitative feedback from all these users, up to 10,000 users. And children, over 90% are saying that they think Gimme is fun to use, that it's built for them. And over 90% of the parents are saying that it actually simplifies their life. And so I think I'm super glad about the outcome here, and that we're also already in less than 6 months, we're top allowance app in the Netherlands. So I think this has been huge, and we're happy to see how we progress next year with ABN AMRO in the Netherlands. Lastly, I would like to say that we see the importance to share data on an aggregated level with the bank. That is absolutely social impact data, like how are children becoming smarter with their money, the tests they're doing. Like we do tests before they start using the app, after they use the app, but also for the bank to understand, like, are our customers, the children, are they interacting with us? On what basis? Do we seem to lose customers? Do we seem to gain customers? A lot of banks out there don't even have data on their whole youth customer base, which I've seen has been a really important point for us when working with ABN AMRO.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is also banks sort of getting a feel of just the data, just in terms of making sense of that data. I think it's going to be super useful as well. All right. So great. Thank you so much. I see some Q&As coming through, Philip. So maybe we'll spend some time looking at those questions and see what they are. All right. I think this is something you touched upon, but the first one I have is, what is the typical time to get a bank up and running with the Gimme proposition?
So with ABN AMRO, we did it in 77 days from the time we signed the contract. I think we become a little bit faster, but usually what we do and what's most important when we talk to the bank is to align on the co-branding. How is the bank's brand being implemented in the app? How do we want it to look and feel? The technical integration, I would say, is less than 10 days. We usually do the localization, which means that we make the translations, we adapt some content for the region or the market, and that we take about 3 to 4 weeks to do. So in general, if we align on the co-branding, we can launch a youth proposition in between 30 to 60 days.
Okay, that is good to know. All right. Any more questions? Feel free to put them in the Q&A box, folks, and I'm happy to ask these. What if there is no open banking regulation in the region? How does that work? So I think I can start with that, and Philip, please add to it. So I think from what I understand, Gimme already has an option of, if no bank account, then there is a way to sort of let the user accumulate a notional amount, and that which can then be redeemed. But please go on, and because so basically it means it can work with or without regulation both, but you can add to it from a product feature perspective.
Yeah, I would say from the product feature perspective, we can launch without using a bank account for the child. So for the younger users, like 7 to 10 years old, they can use the app as a tracker. So you manually need to deposit and withdraw money from this fake account, more or less. So that would be not using real money. But we can also launch it with real money. What we would do then is to do a direct integration. So it's not under open banking, but it's us direct integrating to APIs. But we do need APIs to be able to connect to the bank and make the full proposition work.
Got it. All right, quite a few coming in. Has Gimme been launched in the UAE?
No. So we are looking to launch, and we are looking for a banking partner to launch with, and we're in some conversations right now. So we are planning to come to UAE in 2023, and we're also keeping really good look on the development of the open banking throughout the region.
Yes. And I think it's to say that UAE and generally MENA region in general is something that, I guess, along with TG as well, we're looking at, where regulation exists, where it doesn't, but definitely to be able to bring this proposition to the region as a whole. All right, next one is an interesting one, Philip. When exposing children at younger ages to money, how do we ensure that they're not distracted from their academics?
From the academics? But that's a great question. So actually, we have ethicals that we built out in Gimme. So for instance, we do not want the app to be addictive. We want the children to use the app on an ongoing basis, but we don't want them to use the app half an hour or 1 hour a day. And we don't see that's necessary for them to learn. So I think it's super important when building gamified elements or gamified features and so on. We always need to look out for making it too addictive. But I would say it would rather complement academics and use. I mean, we worked with around 60 schools here in Sweden who have tried out and used this in the classroom. So I would rather say it's a great complement to today's academics.
All right. The next one then, and you touched upon adapting the app to the region. And I think this one sort of is to that. It says, can the content be translated to Arabic? Is that something that you would look at doing when we come into the region?
Definitely. First of all, I would say it has to be. So we always want to have the app on local language. And the way we have built the Gimme app is as modules, which means that, for instance, all translations can be made. And obviously Arabic, it does come with some challenges, but we looked into it and we'll see that we'll sort it out.
All right, great. So that is good to know. And I think, like you said, I think for the region, it's probably something not as a prerequisite, but definitely something that will help with adoption of the app for sure.
Definitely.
You spoke about this, saying that adults need, an education on financial literacy or a course on that as much as young kids. And I think this one is to that, where it says, are there versions or offerings which deal with financial literacy for adult populations? Example, possibly rural populations or population in remote areas which are underdeveloped and lack financial literacy in general, as well as digital literacy. And the context of this is from Pakistan, so possibly regions where literacy in general is low. So to be able to help with that, is there a version of the app that you're looking to address this issue as well?
So the version of the Gimme app is focusing on on children, meaning that we will cater from 7 to 18 years old. What we're looking at in terms of being able for grown-ups to use our features is that we're building them as SDKs, which means that another company who would like to educate young adults or adults can use our features and implement them on their app. But Gimme will not start catering for adults as a separate tool as of today.
Yeah, all right. Okay, I think the next one is similar. We've answered that. Can we create something similar for adults? And I guess this last one, which is the app available in Bahrain? And I think you said we are yet to come into MENA region, but please add to it.
I can say that you can download the app. We have not localized it, which means that you can download it and test it out in English. You won't be able to connect bank accounts, which is the main feature, but you can still play around with the app. So the app is available on App Store if you want to try it out.
All right. One more is, can you talk a little bit more about the role of banks and the need for banks to lead the charge on this?
Yeah, I think if I look 5-10 years ahead, I think most banks will have youth offers because parents and children are expecting them to do so. So the question is rather, I think, what banks will use this as a competitive advantage, and who will make the first advantage move and make sure to cater for this. If as a bank, as a consumer bank, if you do not choose to cater to the youth segment, I think you will in the long term lose parents, and you will have a less inflow of young customers coming in. So I think those will be the effects for the bank. But in terms of how important it is that the banks are part of this social change and the impact, I think it's crucial. Yeah. And that's why we want to partner up with banks, because banks do have access to a lot of users and a lot of customers and can make a lot of impact. And they are so close with the interaction with the money. So even if we start using Gimme in schools, we need them to use it with real money for it to become educational for the children.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to round this off with one last question. And that one is, how does one measure the progress a child is making tangibly using the app?
So we do have tests in the app, a lot of them actually. So when children are doing these lessons, they can also do different tests. We are tracking what we see is their financial literacy level. I would have to say that data is aggregated, and we do not share any personal data in that sense. One's data is only for that person, so we follow the GDPR here. But I would also say that we work with universities where we actually do research on the features and try to connect it to the behavior. So it's not only about theoretical learning, it's about the behavior. So in that way, we try to make sure that the features we're building is having an impact on the user behavior.
Yeah, that is great. All right, and I think this brings us to the end of our webinar today. Just a note to everybody attending, this has been recorded and will be shared with all. Philip, I'd like to thank you for your valuable time. It was insightful, very interesting to me, as I'm sure it was for our audience as well. Audience, thank you all for joining us, and we hope this was worth your time. And everybody, have a good day.
Bye-bye.